My name is Abeni Mwansa. I am 52 years old, a retired school teacher, a widow, and a woman who has seen many kinds of love. The kind that grows slowly like sunrise, the kind that burns like wildfire, and the kind that vanishes before one can catch it. But there is one kind I still do not understand, the love that waits beyond reason. I live in a quiet old apartment overlooking the bustling heart of Johannesburg, where the night never sleeps and dreams are traded like coins. The streets below my balcony are always alive. Taxis honking, vendors shouting, young lovers laughing under neon signs, people rushing, always rushing, as if trying to outrun time itself. Yet, in the middle of all that movement, there was always someone who stood perfectly still. A man. Every evening, at exactly 7 p.m., as reliably as the clock tower beside him, he appeared, rain or shine, winter or summer, holiday or weekday. I saw him there for so long that I began to think he was part of the city itself, like the street lamp above him or the cracked pavement beneath his feet. His name, I would later learn, was Kwame Mensah. He was around 45, tall, with strong shoulders but tired eyes that looked as if they had carried too many nights without sleep. His clothes were always neat, clean shirt, long coat, polished shoes, even when rain soaked him through. And in his hands, without fail, he held a bouquet of white lilies, flowers of remembrance. The first time I noticed him clearly was on a gentle April evening. The sunset bled gold into purple, and the sky glowed like a painting. The wind carried the smell of roasted maize from the street stalls below, children laughing as they chased pigeons across the plaza. The city felt warm and human, and there he was, standing motionless among the crowd, holding those lilies like they were a lifeline. At first, I thought perhaps he was waiting for someone running late. I smiled to myself, remembering young love from long ago. I imagined a woman arriving breathless, laughing as she jumped into his arms. But then, days passed. Days became weeks, and weeks unapologetically slid into months. Every day, 7 p.m., same spot, same flowers, same unwavering gaze at the clock tower. I started looking for him without realizing it. Sometimes I pretended to water my plants just to watch from my balcony. Other times I paused in the kitchen with the light off so I could observe unnoticed. He fascinated me and frightened me, because there is something unsettling about a hope that refuses to die. The city moved around him like a river around a rock. People would glance, stare, whisper. Children would tug at their mothers' hands and ask questions. Teenagers took photos and laughed. Vendors learned to ignore him. The world changed daily, but he changed nothing. One rainy night in July, lightning cracked the sky open like a broken bone. The downpour beat mercilessly against the rooftops, and the wind screamed against windows. Most people ran for shelter, but not him. He stood in the storm, soaked through to his bones, lilies trembling in his shaking hands. Something inside me could not bear it any longer. I grabbed my shawl and umbrella and hurried down the worn apartment steps. My heart pounded, not from fear, but from something deeper, something like a responsibility I did not understand. When I reached him, the rain was pouring so hard it was difficult to speak. But I touched his arm gently and said the only words that came to me. "My son, why do you punish your heart like this?" He turned his head slowly, and his eyes met mine. Eyes red from sleepless nights, swollen with memories too heavy to carry. He looked at me with a smile so soft, so broken it silenced the thunder around us. "I am not punishing myself," he said quietly. "I am keeping a promise. A promise A single word that felt heavier than the storm. His voice trembled as he continued. She said she would come back, and I told her I would wait. The wind ripped through the plaza, scattering water across us like glass. I swallowed hard, feeling my throat tighten. "Who is she?" I asked. For a moment, something like sunlight flickered in his expression, one last flame refusing to die. "Her name is Lina." My heart. It was then I noticed. His hands were trembling so violently he could hardly hold the flowers. And that night, for the first time in 11 months of watching him, I saw a tear fall. Not from the storm, but from somewhere far deeper. I wanted to ask more, to take the weight from his chest the way a mother lifts a crying child. But instead I said softly, "Go home, my son. Even love needs rest." He shook his head with a sad, unwavering certainty. I promised. And there was nothing I could say. When I returned to my apartment, I watched him through the rain-blurred glass. The city lights glowed against the storm, and he stood there like the last survivor of a forgotten world. That night I could not sleep. Something about him haunted me. Not just his pain, but his faith. I wondered, what kind of love waits through storms like that? What kind of love holds a man hostage for years? I thought of my own husband, gone 8 years now. I loved him, yes, but would I wait 11 years at the same place every night? No, I am not that strong, or perhaps I am not that foolish. Sometimes I think they are the same thing. The next evening at 7, I found myself standing again at the balcony railing long before he arrived. And for the first time since I moved into that apartment, I felt the city slow down. The flashing neon signs, the rushing taxis, the endless noise. Everything softened around him like the world was holding its breath. There is something holy about a heart that refuses to surrender. And that night, without understanding why, I whispered to myself, I hope she comes. But fate, my dear listener, does not bend just because we want it to. And love is not always kind. The next morning, I woke with an ache behind my ribs, one I could not name. At my age, I thought I had already seen every form grief could take. I believed heartbreak belonged to the young, to those still naive enough to gamble their souls on another human being. But the image of him standing in the rain would not leave me. All day, as I watered my plants and swept the balcony tiles, I kept glancing at the clock tower below. It loomed tall above the plaza, its hands crawling toward evening with dreadful certainty. Every tick felt like a drum on my bones. Why did a stranger's pain feel like mine? Before I could answer, night returned, quiet and heavy. The sky was still bruised from the storm the night before, clouds hanging low like grief refusing to move on. The plaza filled again with vendors setting up carts, cars spilling headlights across wet asphalt, children chasing each other around puddles. Life continued, as it always does. And then, exactly at 7, he appeared. Kwame walked slowly, as though every step was a negotiation with fate. The lilies in his hands were fresh, too white, too hopeful. He must have bought them only minutes before, arranging each stem carefully like a prayer. I leaned forward on the railing, my knuckles white. He did not look up, not at the sky, not at the buildings or the people passing by, only at the clock tower. Its face glowed gold against the rising darkness, reflecting in his eyes like distant fire. He stood as he always did, still, composed, waiting, but something was different. The way he held the flowers, tighter, the way his shoulders trembled, heavier, and the way he pressed his lips together, as if sealing a scream inside. A group of teenagers walked by, laughing loudly. One of them pointed at him with a smirk. "Look, the ghost man is back," another shouted. "Maybe tonight his imaginary girlfriend shows up." The group burst into laughter as they disappeared into the streetlights. I felt my chest burn. The cruelty of youth is not evil. It is ignorance dressed as confidence. But pain is pain, no matter who delivers it. Kwame did not react. Not a flinch, not a blink. As if he had built a fortress inside himself long ago. That night, I could bear it no longer. I wrapped my shawl around my shoulders and went downstairs once more. When I reached him, he did not notice me at first, lost inside his silent war. I touched his arm gently, the way a mother does when a child is too tired to cry. "My son," I whispered, "tell me who she was." He inhaled deeply, the breath shaking inside his chest. Then he looked up at me, and for the first time, he did not smile. His face was raw, unmasked, wounded. "She was everything," he said, "and the city stole her from me." He spoke the name again, like a prayer breaking apart. "Lina." I nodded slowly. "Tell me about her." And that is when the rain finally stopped. Not from the sky, but from inside him. His voice softened, turning into something fragile and warm. Kwame's voice trembling. "I met her 12 years ago. She was the woman who walked into a room like she was carrying the sun inside her palms. She laughed like rain after a drought, like blessings falling from the sky. Everyone looked at her, but she looked only at me." He stared into the path of memories no one else could follow. "We met at a bookstore on Vilakazi Street. She was reaching for a book, Love in the Time of Cholera. I reached for the same one. We both laughed. Then something happened. Time slowed. The world faded. It was as if God paused the universe just long enough for our eyes to meet." His voice softened further. "From that moment we were inseparable. She used to say I was too serious. I used to say she was too wild. She danced in the rain. I stayed under umbrellas. She loved sunflowers. I loved lilies. She believed life was too short to wait for happiness." He paused, swallowing hard. "And yet, she asked me to wait." The meaning in those words shattered something inside me. Over the weeks that followed, I watched Kwame transform through his memories. His face would soften suddenly in the middle of silence, as if reliving laughter. Other times his jaw tightened like he was choking on sorrow. He told me how they spent weekends exploring the city, wandering through markets, feeding birds in the park, drinking coffee on balconies overlooking busy streets. He told me she dreamed of opening a small art studio where children could paint their futures instead of inheriting their pasts. He told me she called him my patient man. They had plans. Marriage, home, children, a future. And then came the night. Everything changed. Kwame's voice darkened like storm clouds gathering. It was raining that night. We had argued over something small, something stupid. She stormed out of the apartment and shouted from the doorway, "Meet me by the clock tower. 7 o'clock. We had argued over something small, something stupid. She stormed out of the apartment and shouted from the doorway, "Meet me by the clock tower, 7 o'clock. We'll fix this." I tried to follow, but she was gone into the rain. I thought she needed space. I thought we had time. His hands clenched the flowers so tightly petals crushed against his palm. I went to the clock tower at 7. I waited all night. She never came. The silence around us weighed like stone. At dawn, I learned there had been an accident on the highway. A car lost control in the storm. They said she died instantly. Lightning seemed to strike my chest, but then his voice cracked, breaking the world open. "Except the police never found her body." I jerked back, breath stolen. "No body, no bag, no phone, nothing. just her shoes on the pavement, and a trail of lilies crushed into the road. His eyes flooded, spilling grief he had fought too long. So how can I stop waiting? How do you bury someone who vanished? How do you end a story without a last page? His voice shattered into silence. I placed my hand over his. You cannot live inside one moment forever. Life will leave you behind. He shook his head. She promised she would return, and I promised I would wait. After that night, I began hearing stories about him, whispers carried on city winds. People say he had once been one of Johannesburg's brightest architectural minds, designing skyscrapers and stadiums. Some said he walked away from his success the day Lina disappeared. Others said he spent every salary cent searching for her. Detectives, hospitals, morgues, newspapers. Some said he had gone mad. But madness is just another name for love we do not understand. Weeks turned into months, and I found myself drawn to him more deeply than I intended. I brought him tea on cold nights. I stood beside him in silence some evenings. Sometimes he spoke. Sometimes we stood without words, breathing the same grief, watching the clock tower like a lighthouse guiding lost hearts. And then came the night that changed everything. The city was strangely quiet. The rain had stopped. The air held its breath. Kwame arrived earlier than usual. 6:30. He held the lilies tighter than ever, his hands shaking, eyes wild with hope and fear. He turned to me, breathless, voice trembling like a flame in the wind. She's coming tonight. My heart froze. How do you know? He swallowed hard, tears standing in his eyes. Because she called me. And in that moment the world stopped. The night air hung heavy and sweet with rain-soaked asphalt and the smell of roasted street food. The city, for once, seemed to pause in anticipation, as if it too had been holding its breath. I watched Kwame from my balcony as he fidgeted with the lilies, eyes darting to every car, every shadow. His hope was fragile, like glass in the wind, but it burned brighter than anything I had seen in years. Then it happened. The phone rang. I nearly jumped. The sound cracked through the quiet night like lightning, yet Kwame answered it without hesitation, as if the world depended on him hearing every word. Hello? His voice trembled, shaking in the warm night air. He paused. His lips went pale. His grip on the lilies tightened until the stems bent. Yes, I'll be there, I promise. He hung up slowly. A strange calmness replaced the tension in his shoulders, but his eyes betrayed everything. They darted around the street, scanning the darkness, searching for her, even as she was not yet in sight. I could not help myself. I whispered to the wind, Is she real? Or is he chasing ghosts? He looked at me suddenly, almost seeing through my balcony, and smiled softly, a sad, hopeful curve of his lips. She's coming, he said. She promised. Kwame's voice softened as he recounted the memory, as though speaking directly to her ghost. Lina was unlike anyone I had ever met. She laughed in colors. She danced in corridors like they were made of sunlight. She would trace the veins of leaves in the park and tell me they had stories that only the patient could hear. She believed life could always be repaired, even if broken into pieces. He paused, his eyes glazed with memory. I remember the first time she told me she loved me. We were at a small cafe near Newtown. Rain streaked the windows. The barista was singing off-key. Lina smiled and took my hand, pressing it gently into hers. I choose you, she said. Even if the city forgets to love us, I choose you. He swallowed hard. I promised her there and then that I would never leave her, that I would wait, no matter what. Back in the present, I watched him pace beneath the street lamp. Each tick of the clock tower felt louder than the one before, echoing against the brick walls and the empty streets. Minutes stretched into eternity. And then I saw it. A shadow emerging from the darkness. A figure moving slowly, almost reluctantly, through the wet asphalt. Kwame froze. Lilies raised as if in defense and recognition all at once. The city noise fell away, leaving only the heavy thump of my own heartbeat. She's here, Kwame whispered, trembling. I told you she would come. I wanted to call out a warning, to shake him back to reality, but something in me, something in the air, stopped me. The figure drew closer. The street lamp above cast a halo, illuminating a woman drenched in rain, hair plastered to her face, eyes hidden. Her steps faltered, hesitant like a memory trying to walk through walls. Kwame's breath hitched. He took a step toward her. Lina. The woman stopped, her hands raised slightly, trembling. The lilies at Kwame's side bent from his grip, and then she vanished. Just like that. No scream, no explanation, nothing but the sound of the rain striking the pavement. Kwame sank to his knees, bouquet in hand, his tears blending with the raindrops. She was supposed to come, he whispered. I waited for years. And she disappeared. Kwame sat on the edge of the plaza that night, water dripping from his coat. He remembered everything, the small details that time had tried to erase. I had planned to propose to her, he murmured. We had saved up for a little studio downtown. I bought the ring. I had rehearsed what I would say over and over. Lina, I will wait for you through every storm, every mistake. Will you marry me? And she laughed. Oh, she laughed and said, I will wait too. We are both stubborn. He pressed the crushed lilies to his chest. And then, the accident. The day she vanished. The world ended for me. I stood silently beside him, unsure if I should speak or let him drown in memory. The truth was too heavy to lift, and perhaps some grief is sacred in its silence. Days passed. The city moved, indifferent to his suffering. He stopped sleeping in his apartment, spending nights by the clock tower with the lilies, eyes scanning shadows for something that would never return. People whispered, laughed, and pointed. The madman at the clock tower. He waits for a ghost, and in the whisper of the wind, he would answer only to Lina, I am still here. I will wait. I will never leave. Until that night, the night that the city would forget to love entirely. Kwame adjusted the lilies in his hands, the petals soaking in the puddles at his feet. The city around him blurred with headlights and reflections, people rushing past like ghosts of life itself. He checked his watch. 7 p.m. He inhaled deeply. And then the phone rang. The voice was soft, feminine, and familiar, but not entirely real. It whispered through the speaker with a chilling familiarity. Kwame, I am coming. The line went dead. Silence. Kwame froze. Heart pounding. Mind reeling. Could it be her? Could it really be her? Or was it something else? Something the city had conjured to punish hope. He clutched the lilies to his chest, knuckles white. He whispered into the night, I will wait, no matter what. Kwame sat on the edge of the plaza that night, water dripping from his coat. He remembered everything, the small details that time had tried to erase. I had planned to propose to her, he murmured. We had saved up for a little studio downtown. I bought the ring. I had rehearsed what I would say over and over. Lina, I will wait for you through every storm, every mistake. Will you marry me? And she laughed. Oh, she laughed, and said, I will wait too. We are both stubborn. He pressed the crushed lilies to his chest. And then, the accident. The day she vanished. The world ended for me. I stood silently beside him, unsure if I should speak or let him drown in memory. The truth was too heavy to lift, and perhaps some grief is sacred in its silence. The countdown to tragedy. Days passed. The city moved, indifferent to his suffering. He stopped sleeping in his apartment, spending nights by the clock tower with the Lilies, eyes scanning shadows for something that would never return. People whispered, laughed, and pointed. The madman at the clock tower. He waits for a ghost, and in the whisper of the wind, he would answer only to Lina. I am still here. I will wait. I will never leave. Until that night. The night that the city would forget to love entirely. Kwame adjusted the lilies in his hands, the petals soaking in the puddles at his feet, the city around him blur. The night air was heavy and thick, as if the city itself had held its breath. I watched Kwame pacing beneath the street lamp, lilies clutched to his chest, waiting with a faith that defied reason. The neon lights reflected in the puddles around him, making the rain-soaked asphalt look like fractured glass. Each reflection seemed to carry the weight of every lost hope, every whispered promise, every story abandoned. And then it happened. The tires screeched. A taxi lost control, sliding across the slick street like a silver bullet. People screamed. Rainwater and reflections collided. The lilies fell from Kwame's trembling hands, petals scattering across the wet asphalt like fragile ghosts. I ran, my heart in my throat, weaving through the crowd. When I reached him, he was lying on the pavement, his coat drenched, his face pale and twisted with pain. Blood mixed with rainwater streaked his temple, and his lips trembled as he gasped for air. "Lina?" he whispered, reaching for the space where she should have appeared. She promised." Paramedics rushed past me, lifting him carefully, murmuring instructions to each other. I ran alongside, holding his hand, feeling the cold squeeze of life barely there. "Please, let him live," I whispered into the stormy night. "Let him see tomorrow." And then it hit me. The city had not forgotten to love him. Someone else had forgotten. Fate, chance, or something darker. At the hospital, I sat beside him, holding his hand as if my warmth could keep his heart beating. Hours passed. Machines beeped in rhythm with the tense silence of the emergency room. Nurses moved like ghosts around us, bringing blankets, checking vitals, whispering soft encouragements. Finally, the doctor pulled me aside. "He's stable for now. But he was lucky," she said quietly. "But there's something else you need to know." My stomach sank. "Lina. She died 11 years ago in a car accident. On the same night she promised to meet him at the clock tower." Time froze around me. My knees weakened. I felt as if the air had been stolen from the room I turned to see Kwame, unconscious, pale, fragile as porcelain, still clutching a single crushed lily in his hand. My mind raced. Then, who was he waiting for? No answer came, only the steady beep of the heart monitor. The rain outside the window still falling in endless sheets. I remembered the day Lina vanished. Like it was carved into my bones, Kwame had told me about it. But never the details he had never shared aloud. The accident had been real. She had been on her way to the city center when a truck lost control in the storm. Her body was never recovered, only her shoes, scattered across the asphalt, and a small bouquet of white lilies in her bag. He didn't know she had died. The city hadn't told him. He had been waiting for a ghost, clinging to hope so pure it defied logic, defied time, and perhaps defied death itself. And somehow he had sensed her presence, her memory, reaching out to him in the rain, in reflections, in shadows. The twist was cruel and heartbreaking. He had loved someone dead for years. He had believed in a promise that could never be kept. For days I stayed by his side, nursing him back from the brink. Each hour, each breath, each heartbeat was a reminder of love's cruel persistence. I did not know if he would ever recover fully. Not his body, not his heart. The weight of years of longing and loss could not be undone so easily, but I realized something essential. Love does not die, even when the world forgets. It lives in memory, in hope, in every choice we make to keep going. I brought him flowers every day, lilies, tulips, sunflowers, whispering stories of Lina to him so he could feel her presence, so he could finally let his heart breathe without the unbearable weight of expectation. And slowly he began to talk again. Slowly he smiled again. Slowly he remembered that life still had warmth, even if it came from someone else's hands. Weeks later, he returned to the plaza, not to wait, but to walk. He still carried a single lily in his hand, but now it was a symbol, not a tether. He walked among the bustling city, noticing the laughter of children, the chatter of vendors, the lovers holding hands. The world did not stop for him anymore, and I watched from my balcony, a quiet smile on my lips. The city forgot to love, I whispered, but love never forgets the city. And in that moment the city felt alive again. Hope returned, life returned. Even heartbreak, in its own way, had given him the chance to love once more. This time, not bound by ghosts, not trapped by promises, but free to live freely, bravely, and fiercely. Some stories do not have a happy ending. Some stories do not have a closure that fits neatly into pages, but they live on in memory. Kwame waited for Lina for 11 years. She never returned. Yet, in waiting, he remembered what it meant to love. He learned grief, hope, patience, and courage. He learned that love could survive even in absence, even in silence, even when the city forgot. And so, I tell you this story, not to give answers, but to give a truth. Love is not measured by presence, but by the depth of its impact. Even when hearts break, even when time separates us, love leaves footprints. Footprints we carry forever,